This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Everybody, so we were going to start with a prayer. Bonnie, do you want to introduce who's going to be starting us off with our prayer?
Sure, we can go ahead. We thought that since Ramadan is quickly approaching, that it would be apropos to allow one of our Muslim friends to start us off in prayer. So let me introduce Salman Sheikh. He's a member of this Islamic Society of Baltimore. Salman?
Okay. I'll read the dua, the supplication. So we implore you, O God, glory to you be the Most High, to lend your perfect most assistance to us in preserving all of your creation. We ask you to make clear to us the ways that we can reverse the damage of the past. We ask you to make the way easy for us. We ask that you help us to follow the excellent example of all your prophets. May peace be upon them. We ask that you cause a great awakening in those whose excess has caused the most damage, those whose vast resources which could be used to alleviate suffering, but are instead used to cause suffering, and open their eyes to a better way. We beseech you to turn our gaze towards the past and the future for solutions to the damage caused thus far. We ask that you bless and have mercy upon those who are suffering from the effects of climate change and the destruction of their homelands. We beseech you to open the eyes of those around the world, to awaken their intellect, and to ignite the fiery passion of change in all those who deny the crisis that your creation is undergoing. We ask that you soften the hearts of those in power and cause them to turn away from the evil of complacence. And we beg you to give us the strength and stamina needed to continue this fight and to make all of our endeavors successful and pleasing to you. Amen. Amin is what we say in Arabic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful expression of faith. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Matt.
Thank you. All right. So to get us started tonight, before we get started, I'm going to turn off everybody's webcam, so you're going to see everybody go dark for a second. And we have a short video to get us started to sort of set the mood. So just bear with me a second as I push all the buttons. All right. Bonnie, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, here we go.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality. But little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First, he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. See if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
So that's just a little bit of humor. We all can use a little humor these days. So that in a way to show if only behavior change could be that easy, that we could accomplish it in a mere elevator ride. But today we have our guest speaker is Suzanne Etkin, who is a expert on behavior change. Suzanne Kilby Etkin is the founding executive director of the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy. Growing up on the shores of the South River, Suzanne has a deep love for local waterways. Now living on Maryland's eastern shore, she spends as much time as she can on or near the water with her daughters Rose and Caroline and her husband Rob. She is the recipient of the Green Heron Award of the Seven River Association, the Sierra Club Environmentalist of the Year, the Jan Hallman Environmental Education Award, and the 2012 WYCA Twin Tribute to Women in Industry Award. Suzanne holds a BS in Environmental Science and a Master's in Religion and Ecology. She is a trained community-based social marketing technical assistance provider, assisting stewards and organizations in the development of campaigns to change polluting behaviors. In addition to founding and managing the Watershed Stewards Academy, she has participated in water quality monitoring efforts, including chemical and macroinvertebrate surveys, instructed restoration education programs, directed environmental summer camps, served as Arlington Echo's apiarist, which is a beekeeper, and instructed the Low Ropes team building instructor certification course. She enjoys cooking, hiking, gardening, paddleboarding, and her very large, crazy family. In her time off, you can find her organizing family events and dreaming of being in Maine. Let's all welcome Suzanne, and we really look forward to this presentation.
Thanks, Bonnie, so much for having me here. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has taken some time out of their evening to come and focus on doing something really good in this Earth Month. We're all stuck at home, and so it's a great time to really think about how we can change and make positive change in our community. So I'm so honored to be here among all of you. This is a different setting to be giving a presentation. I usually like to be very conversational. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to give a presentation and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. I just wanted to start by telling folks who don't know what Watershed Stewards Academy is, what Watershed Stewards Academy is. I saw so many people I know and recognize, but for those that aren't familiar with Watershed Stewards Academy, we're a nonprofit organization based in Anne Arundel County, and we train and support community leaders to coordinate environmental restoration. And we really consider both in the ground restoration and also behavioral changes to both be important. We are Watershed Stewards Academy in Anne Arundel County, but for those of you in other places in Maryland and then even across the watershed, there are other academies. So if you are not familiar with your local academy and don't know where to find them, I'd be happy to connect you if there is one in your community. So with that, tonight I was asked to give a primer on behavior change to congregations. And this is the backdrop of this presentation is within a partnership that we have with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, Interfaith Power and Light, and many other organizations to motivate and inspire congregations to take action. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to help congregations help to make some behavioral changes that can help our environment. So this presentation is going to be a very broad overview of the behavior change process. Behavior change is a very involved social science process. But we are, through the One Water Partnership, we're distilling it down into hopefully what we hope will be a manageable process for lay leaders to affect change in their congregation. So today will be a big overview, and then in the coming months, we're going to be breaking apart the steps and providing those of you that want to take action on this with some tools and resources that you can use in your congregation. So with that, my screen is frozen. Okay, there we go. So a couple of points of context. We've been trying to restore the Chesapeake Bay for 40 years now, and it's been an uphill battle, although we are making progress. And one thing that's important to recognize, not only how big our bay is and how big the drainage area is, but how many people live in the waterway. We have 1,800 local governments, 18 million people live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and I'm assuming that you all probably know what I mean by the Chesapeake Bay watershed, the area of land around the Chesapeake Bay, which encompasses 6 states plus the District of Columbia. And even more than that, 150,000 new people move into the Bay watershed every year. And it's for that reason that people who are trying to restore the Bay want to focus on what people can do. And there's actually a partnership of government organizations that has set
Unmuted.
Hey, I was getting a beep and now I'm okay. Can everyone hear me now? Bonnie, can you hear me again? Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Great. Okay, so there are goals about. Great. There are goals about really trying to affect the people who live in the Bay. And so one of those is called the Citizen Stewardship Goal. And the Citizen Stewardship Goal for the Chesapeake Bay is to increase the number and diversity of trained and mobilized citizen steward volunteers with the knowledge and skills to enhance the health of their local watersheds. So that's particularly important as we consider how we're going to save the Chesapeake Bay, the people. And the Bay program, who has set this goal, has identified citizens or people who live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed and are acting on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay to sort of be in 3 categories. One is individual citizens taking action in their own houses, yards, in their own life. The second category is people who come together to volunteer, do community action. And the third is these community leaders or champions who are leading the action. And that's who you guys are. Everyone on this webcast, I consider you a community leader, leading action and helping to really broaden the number of people who are acting in the Chesapeake Bay to help us restore the Bay. And so you guys are an incredibly important part of achieving that goal of having citizens and residents who are literate and can take action. So the Bay program, in order to begin to learn about how people across the Bay watershed view the Bay and what kind of things are they doing or not doing in their own yards and their own homes to help the Bay, they actually did a survey across the Chesapeake Bay in 2017. And I listed out some things, and it surveyed people in every single state that's part of the Bay watershed and in the district in a statistically significant number. And I lifted out some things that I think are helpful context as we begin to think about how we work with our communities. The first one is that 65% of people across the Bay believe that water pollution affects me personally. So this is not something that people think is of no consequence. People think that water pollution is a big deal and it affects them. And they say that they want to do more to make their local creeks, waters, and lakes healthier. So 71% say, I want to do something. I want to do something more. And then even more, people believe that if we all work together, we can make a difference. We can fix this, which is significant because, you know, for most of my lifetime, 2/3 of my lifetime, we've been trying to fix the bay and haven't fixed it yet. And do we feel defeated? And the answer is no. People think that we can make a difference, 87%. But here's the shocker. Only 37% of people across the Bay watershed, actually 37% in Anne Arundel County, but 35% across the Bay watershed believe that their personal actions contribute to water quality or water pollution. So we all think we can make a difference, but a lot of people don't really believe that what they do in their own yards makes a difference. So that is a really important point. And then beyond that, there are very few people of the entire population that have volunteered. Look at that, 5% have volunteered frequently or very frequently. And that's against the 87% that say that we can fix it if we all work together. So we're not all working together. In Anne Arundel County, only 43% of the people can name a local water protection group. In Anne Arundel County, where we have 10,000 of them, only 43% can name one. So, you know, people have a long way to go in their understanding of how to take action, even though they intend and they want to. So this is where you come in. So this same survey also measured a number of behaviors, 21 behaviors that people could do in their own yards. And there's data on how widely people are doing or not doing that. I'm going to get back to this in a little minute. But let me, this is usually where I pause. Let me just continue then. So we need to change some behaviors, and that's what we're here tonight to talk about. So we know that people want to change behaviors. We know that people are ready to help, but they aren't very engaged at this point, which is where you come in and why we need you to help us change behavior. So the chart that I have up now is a chart called the diffusion of innovations curve. And this is basic human behavior on how we adopt any new behaviors. And what you can see is that on the left-hand side of the curve, you have the early adopters and the innovators. Only a small part of our population, about 15% of our population. And for those people, all you really have to do is tell them, hey, go out and buy a rain barrel. And they've got the rain barrel and they have it hooked up and they've, you know, dug a trench and they've planted some native plants. Those are the early adopters and the innovators. All you have to do is you have to show them what to do and they'll do it. On the right-hand side, you have what we call the Make Me group. Okay, so making a behavior change, as I said, you know, we've got some people that will make a behavior change just right off the bat. And some people, 16% on the right-hand side of that curve, that aren't going to make a change no matter what. But you can see that the vast majority of people will make a change if they just have some help. You have to do more than just show them what to do, but you don't have to make them, you just have to give them some help. If we think about how we try to make behavior changes, when you think about you want someone to go install a rain barrel, you'll often see websites, you know, talking about what a rain barrel is and how it works, or you might see, you know, a little stormwater 101 on what rain barrels do, and those kinds of informational techniques really only help the first 15% of the people. The slide that I have up now, the blue curve shows where we tend to focus our investment when we're trying to get people to change their behavior. So we tend to spend a lot of time and money on websites and pamphlets and trying to convince people they should do the behavior that we want. And we know that that only helps the people that are already going to take action anyway. And we also spend a lot of time and money on getting lawsuits and regulations and things that sort of make people do things. But we often forget about all the people in the middle that would just adopt a behavior if they had some help. So this is what this presentation is going to be about, helping people in your community to take action. So I just want to make a fine point if you haven't gotten it and if you remember nothing else from this presentation, which is that if you want to change people's behavior, you have to do something more than education and awareness. It's not enough to just tell people about the action that you want to take or to try to convince them to take the action, because really, you know, you can't change someone's behavior if they don't want to have it changed. So you have to do more than just education and awareness. And what we are going to do today is think about what help does our community need to take an action, and who is the best group in your community to take that action. So we're going to be focusing on some steps for social marketing. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little secret about me. This is my dirty little secret. I am an environmental professional, and I've been an environmental professional for quite some time, but I don't always act and I don't always do everything that I know that I should do. And I think if I asked you to raise your hand and everybody was being honest, I think we can all say that there are things that we know we should be doing and that we want to do that we don't always do. So I'm going to tell a story about myself when I was not adopting a behavior that I knew I wanted to adopt. And that was about a decade ago when my daughter Rosie, who's in this picture, was a little bit younger than this. I was really focusing on the fact that when I went into the grocery store, I would always come out of the grocery store with plastic bags. I never used my reusable bags, and I had about 10,000 reusable bags. There was no excuse for me not to use them. And you too, Elizabeth. So I really wanted to use these bags, and I thought to myself, well, why? I really want to use the bags. Why am I not using them? So I thought, well, maybe I need to have the bags in my car. So I put them in my trunk, and I still, you know, came out of the store without my reusable bags. And I said, well, maybe I need to have them where they're visible. So I put them in my front seat. Well, guess what? I still went into the grocery store without those bags. And, you know, you might say, well, why not, when you remembered you didn't have them, why don't you just go back out to your car? Well, at that time I had an infant, and you know, when you have an infant, you have 3.5 minutes to do grocery shopping, and you don't have time to go back out to your car. So I just didn't have time to go back out to my car. And I actually did see these little signs in my grocery store, you know, when you got to the checkout that said, you know, did you remember your reusable bags? Well, at the checkout, that's too late. So I was really puzzling with myself. Why can't I remember to get my bags? Why don't I remember that? I'm just a horrible environmentalist. So late at night, one night, I was coming home from teaching a class, and I was at the grocery store, and it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I just had to run in for a few things. And usually at 10 o'clock at night, there's not a lot of people in the grocery store. And where I live, I don't often encounter people that I work with, but I ended up being in line right next to someone who is another environmental advocate. And she was in the lane right next to me, and she was watching me check out, and I did not have my bags. And I wanted to crawl underneath the counter. I was so embarrassed, and it really made an impression on me. And I told the clerk, quick, give me some of those, you know, reusable bags that I can buy at the end of the lane. And I quickly put all my groceries in the reusable bag. And that was a turning point for me. It was a turning point where I realized that there was some social pressure for me to act in the way that I wanted to act. And I decided I really was forgetting. And the thing that I needed was a reminder. I needed a reminder to bring my bags where I needed to see it. So I made myself a brightly colored sign that I put on my steering wheel that reminded me in very colorful language not to forget my bags or I would be embarrassed at the checkout. That was what I needed to change that behavior. So I didn't need to be told why I needed to bring bags. I didn't need to be told that where to get bags. I didn't need to be reminded at the checkout because that was too late, and I had plenty of bags. So I really had to figure out for myself, what did I need to change that behavior? And so that's what we're going to talk about doing with your congregation. And when I finally learned to use my bags, I felt so proud of myself, very proud. What I'm going to run through today is basically 5 steps in creating a behavior change campaign in your community. And so it's helping people take actions that they already want to take. And I distilled this down to 5 steps. And for congregations, what we're going to try to do is to really help give you some easy ways to use each of these steps, because each of these steps could take years to complete and, cost lots of money to implement, but we're going to actually try to make this pretty easy for congregation members. So the first step is to actually pick a behavior. And that sounds like an easy thing. And it's not as easy as you might think. So when you're looking for a behavior, you might love, the behavior of picking up pet waste, for example, but that might not be the one that is the best for your community. So the science of picking a behavior is an important one. First of all, the behavior should be a single behavior, so not a behavior that can be broken down into lots of different behaviors altogether. And it should be one that results in pollution reduction. So I have 5 behaviors up here: purchasing a rain barrel, picking up pet waste, using a bay-friendly lawn care regime, getting a household energy audit, and disposing of household hazardous waste at a county disposal site. So now I usually ask people, which of these is the single end state behavior? And the answer is that disposing of the household waste is the single behavior. Purchasing a rain barrel is great, but most people who purchase them don't hook them up. So that's not really an end state behavior. Picking up pet waste is great, but you have to throw it away in the proper way. I have a friend who did a pet waste campaign in her community, and she was so proud following a neighbor one morning picking up all his pet waste, only to find that when he turned back into his yard, he emptied the poop bag into the woods. So that was not the proper way to dispose of that. He thought it was proper, like it would decompose in the woods, but not quite right. A bay-friendly lawn care regime is composed of many, many, many different things, so that's not single. Getting a household energy audit, you have to follow through on what they recommend, but disposing of your household hazardous waste at the county disposal site is a single end state behavior. And then, so once you have some single end state behaviors that you think you might like to adopt, you want to think about 3 factors. First is, how much will this behavior actually make a difference? What's the impact on water quality? Or if you're going for impact on climate change, how much will this behavior make a difference? The second thing is what we call opportunity. How many people in your congregation are not doing this? So you don't want to select a behavior that a lot of people have already adopted, because what's the point in doing a behavior change campaign if everyone has already changed their behavior? So that's opportunity. And then likelihood. How likely is your target audience to adopt? Yes, they will. Yes, we'll give you the slides afterwards. Definitely. So how likely is your target audience to pick up their pet waste? Or adopt the behavior? And the likelihood one is an interesting one. What I've found on the pet waste behavior is that people who live in rural areas are much less likely, and almost not likely at all, to pick up pet waste as compared to people who live in more urban areas. So you're going to want to look at those three things, impact, opportunity, and likelihood. And so when we have the next webinar on actually choosing a behavior, we will teach you and we'll give you some tools for measuring the impact, the likelihood, and the opportunity so that you can compare the behaviors that you've chosen against each other and pick the right one. Because picking the right behavior is sort of key to actually making a difference. So I usually like to pause and ask questions about that, but I think I'll just keep going as recommended and we can talk more about that later. And again, we'll have other webinars where we can dive into how to actually do this. So once you have your behavior, you want to pick your target audience. So your target audience should not be everyone in your congregation. You should really be looking at who are the groups in your congregation and which of those is the best one to choose. And again, we just talked through this slide, the diffusion of innovation slide, where we know that we have people that just need a little bit of to be told, and we have people that need to be made to do things, but what we're looking for is the people in the middle, the ones that will want help and be able to change their behavior. So just like choosing a behavior, choosing an audience has sort of three simple things to think about. The first one is size. How big is your audience? So if you're thinking about your congregation, you know, what are the different groups of people in your congregation? You could do men versus women. You could do people who are involved in religious education, adults in religious education. You could think about the garden club or the choir, for example. Those are all different groups of segments of your congregation. Obviously, the segments to target, the bigger the segment to target, the more people you'll be able to move and the more successful you'll be. So you want to choose a target audience that is as large as you can. The second is you want to choose an audience that has not already adopted the behavior. So that's sort of intuitive, right? You don't want to choose an audience that is, let's say, already doing the action that you want. So for example, if your action is you want people to plant trees and your garden club is one of your audiences, but they're already planting trees, maybe they're not the group that you would want to choose. And then the likelihood, how likely are they to adopt the behavior? So this is just a little slide from the stewardship indicator, and this is about pet waste. And the stewardship indicator survey that I was talking about earlier not only measured behaviors, it also had a lot of demographic data that they collected with it. So within that indicator, you can break down by segments of the population who's the most likely to begin picking up pet waste. And what you can see here is people in West Virginia, not going to pick up their pet waste. You might as well not try it. People over 45, sorry, can't teach an old dog new tricks, according to this. Not that you can't, but this is saying that people over 45 are saying they're not likely to begin picking up their pet waste. But if you look at people who live in DC, people who live in condos, people who are under 25, they begin to be very much more likely to pick up their pet waste. And so what we'll end up doing is we'll end up giving you surveys that will help you to get the same data from within your congregation so that you can measure these things about your congregation. I'm just giving you an example of what kinds of data you can get. And so obviously, if you were working on pet waste, you would probably want to focus on people who lived in apartments or condos. So that is just a little example of choosing your audience. And in the same way, we have a little worksheet where you can rank the size and the likelihood and the opportunity, you multiply them together, and then you can begin to see how different groups in your congregation might stack up, and you can target your outreach to those groups. So once you know your behavior and your audience, what you want to find out then is why people have not already adopted the behavior that you want. Or for people that have, why did they? And so this step called identifying barriers and benefits is probably one of the hardest steps to do for people that are passionate environmentalists. So if you're a passionate environmentalist, you want to really tell people why they should, or you're really concerned about why people aren't acting the way that you think that they should. But you have to just turn off your advocacy brain and turn on your ears and just listen. So there's a process that will teach you where you can go through either some focus groups like you see here. You know, this could be you, Kathy Flement, leading a focus group of people around the table and asking them those why questions and really listening. You can also do little things called intercept surveys where, you know, after your congregation service, you could intercept, you know, 20 people coming out of the service that are in your target audience and have a quick chat about the barriers and benefits. And again, we'll give you some tools to do this in your congregation, but you're really looking at why. And if you think back to my example about the bags, my why was two things. Number one, I just kept forgetting. And number two, I wasn't significantly motivated to make that change, obviously. And I got very motivated when I realized that there were going to be peers that were watching what I did or knowing what that I wasn't adopting that behavior. So you really want to find out why. Why are people doing or not doing that thing? So once you find out the why, you're going to ask yourself, how can I give people the help that they need? For me, I needed that prompt, that little sign on my steering wheel. I needed it to say the right things, and I needed it in the right place. You know, what products or services might help them take the action? If you're trying to get people to plant trees, you know, do they need a list of native trees? Do they need trees brought to them at the congregation so they can just pick the right tree out? Do they need to know, you know, what's the right tree for the moisture and soil in my yard? You know, what products or services do people need? Then how will you reach your audience? You know, do you need to do something at the congregation? Do you need to meet them, you know, at their house? Are they a group that really communicates over social media? Do you need to use some tools? Are they a group that, you know, is a captive audience on Sunday mornings, and so maybe you need to reach them through a talk at your congregation service? So how will you reach them? And then the social science tools, you know, what social science tools might help you? So, so we're going to go through a bunch of social science tools that you can use in your congregation. And again, with our behavior change toolbox, we're going to be giving you examples of these kinds of tools that are appropriate for a couple of behaviors that we're going to talk about. So the first behavior change tool is my favorite, the prompt. The prompt, that's that little sign that I put on my steering wheel. A prompt is a visual or audio cue that reminds people to do a behavior that they already intend to do. And it has to be noticeable and very simple and self-explanatory. This is not the time to try to use catchy phrases or to try to be cute. What you want to do is just tell people what to do. Be as clear and concise as you can. The next one is important. It's best to use close in time and space to where the activity will or will not happen. If you think about my example, there were signs, prompts to use reusable bags, but they were in the grocery store. They weren't where I needed to grab the bags, which was in my car. So I needed that prompt close in space and time to where I needed to take that action, which was to grab that bag. You also want to use prompts to encourage positive behavior. You don't want to use prompts to discourage negative behavior, because what we found is that it just encourages negative behavior. It's weird, but it does. So encourage positive behavior. The second, and this is actually another really fun one that I think is so important for congregations, and that is the commitment tool. You know, many of our religious histories, stories have the idea of covenant in it. We make an agreement. God makes a covenant with us. So the idea of making a commitment is really close to a lot of our faith histories and faith stories. And we find this commitment tool really effective in congregations. A couple of things about commitments. A written commitment is more effective than a verbal commitment. A public commitment is even more effective, where you're standing up in front of someone and making the commitment. Commitments really help people to see ourselves in the way that we want to see ourselves. It makes us feel good when we are committing to do something that makes us feel good about ourselves. And then a small commitment often can lead to a much larger commitment. So if you ask someone to give $5 to a cause, and then the next time you come back and ask them to give $10, they'll be more likely, because they've already given the 5. You know, you ask someone to do something small, they realize they can do it, and then they agree to do something bigger next time. Social norms and social diffusion. This is what happened to me, although it was not engineered. When I saw my colleague in the checkout line, I was shamed. And shame is sort of, I was motivated because she was using her reusable bag, and she's someone that I have a great opinion of, and I thought she had a great opinion of me, but I knew that if I were her, my opinion would be diminished if I saw me over there, you know, using plastic bags. So this idea of using groups of people in your congregation who may be adopting a behavior to help influence the rest of the group, the rest of the congregation, is another one that's really good to use. Feedback tools. Feedback tools can be great to give people immediate feedback after they've taken an action, to be clear, to frame what they're doing against, you know, what the larger group is doing. Our recycling center in Anne Arundel County sends out these, you know, how much are you recycling compared to your neighbors, and that can motivate someone to continue to recycle more. Incentives. So incentives can be, I think it's getting dark in here. Let's see. Is that better? So incentives can be intrinsic or extrinsic. They can be monetary or non-monetary. Think about giving someone an incentive. It's not always giving them money off or giving them something for free. It could be giving them something that helps them save time. You know, time is the most precious and expensive thing we all have. So incentives can be used to help people take an action. How-tos. Sometimes we do workshops to teach people. This is a rain barrel workshop. So if you're trying to get people to plant trees, you might do a how-to workshop, how to plant their tree. That might be if they're unsure about how to put a tree in the ground. That might be something that you could do to help them. But you have to really know from your barrier and benefit research that they don't know how to do it and that they'd like to do it themselves. You know, one thing that we've learned about rain barrel workshops is you can do all the workshops in the world, but if someone isn't comfortable with power tools, they're never going to do, even if they understand how to install a rain barrel. If they're not comfortable with those power tools, a how-to workshop isn't going to help them with that. What you really need to do is provide them with low-cost installation service. So really listening to your audience, this is important. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you're going to think back on your barrier and benefit research, and you're going to match what you heard in your barriers and benefits with the tools that you might use. For example, if someone is forgetting to act, you might want to use a prompt. If they're not really motivated to act, maybe you want to use a commitment or an incentive, or help them understand that most people are making this action that might push them over the edge. So there's a whole science to sort of matching what you hear with your barriers and benefits to the tools that you might pick. And then along with your tools, you're gonna think about what your strategy is. And those of you that know anything about marketing might be familiar with the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. So product, what goods or services does your audience need to take action? Do they need that tree? Do they need someone to come and figure out where the tree should be planted in their yard? Do they need a big recycle bin? You know, if you're asking people to recycle more. If you're asking people to eat less meat, do they need recipes that come to their inbox every Friday night, and the come to your inbox is particularly important when we try to think about place. Where is your audience going to get this information? Where are they taking the action? Where do they need to be hearing things? Price might be looking at what is the cost for your audience to take this action? How can you minimize that cost, both the monetary cost and the time cost? So that's price. And then promotion. Where do they hear about, where will they hear about your campaign and your tools? How do they get their information? Are they a social media person, or does that audience really do well with, do they really read the church bulletin? So do you want to give them the information in the church bulletin? Do they not do electronic communications? And who might be the best person to carry the message? Is it your pastor? Is it the youth minister? Is it the garden guru? So when we talk about strategies and tools, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into these. I do have to say that, one more thing, and I want this to be really, I want you all to sink in. I know I wanted you guys to remember that information is never enough to change people's behavior, but I also want you to remember that personal one-on-one contact with someone that a person knows and trusts and views as an authority figure or knowledgeable is the best way that people, the highest way people change their behavior. And so I think of all of you that are out there in cyberspace listening to me, whose faces I can't see. You guys are that one-on-one communicator with your congregation. So I just want you to recognize how important what you say and how you lead in your congregation is, because it's likely that your actions and your leadership are going to cause change in your congregation much more than any campaign could. So then we put it all together, and we have a systematic way of helping you choose what tools, and how you're going to implement those tools to help change behaviors. So I have to tell you, and then the last thing that you do, so after you implement, use all your tools for a little while, you then want to measure if you made behavior change. And a couple different ways that you can do that. You can do a post-campaign survey, which we'll provide for you. And you can also do a visual evaluation. If you're trying to get people to plant trees, maybe it's that they take a picture of the tree that they planted. Or if you're trying to get them to use less single-use plastics, you might get them to take a picture of their plastic and their recycling that is less. So those are the two ways that we're going to focus on measuring our behavior change, either through a survey or some kind of a visual evaluation. So I am almost to the end, and I hope we'll have some good discussion here, but if you are overwhelmed by what I have presented today, don't worry. We are going to provide for folks that want to dig into this a little bit more, really some tools and sort of some steps and some help so that you can implement some of these practices in your congregation. So what we are doing is we are creating a behavior change toolbox that will probably cover 4 or 5 behaviors. And the behaviors that we've chosen are on the screen. They are plant and care for a tree, plant and care for native plants or a conservation landscape, reduce single-use plastic, eat less meat, and probably reduce food waste. This is actually something that just came up a couple days ago, and so I haven't really settled with this behavior yet. That's a behavior that's being really touted by the climate change community. So we're just considering how that might work in this setting. But we chose these behaviors for a couple of reasons. The first is the first 2, plant a tree and plant native plants or a conservation landscape. Those 2 behaviors are behaviors that can be done right now. Well, they can all be done right now, but they can be done on the congregational setting or in your own backyard. All of these can be. Plant a tree and the conservation landscape also are the highest on the stewardship indicator in terms of the opportunity and the likelihood. So they are they're behaviors that a large amount of the population has not already adopted, but say that they would be likely to adopt. So those 2 behaviors are on there. Reducing single-use plastics is on there because that has been sort of there's been growing interest from many groups in doing that, as the plastic problem in the ocean and problems with plastic recycling have really hit the news. So I think that is in people's forefront of their mind. The eat less meat is one certainly that, as we're all home on quarantine, that we could use this time to do a little bit more. We all have perhaps a little more time for cooking, and meat is something that is not quite so available in the store sometimes. And so eating less meat is certainly a great thing to do for the planet, and might be appropriate for this time while we are all quarantined. And again, food waste. So those are the behaviors that we are focusing on for these behavior change toolboxes. But after this webinar, probably tomorrow, I will send you all a survey which asks you if you're interested in doing a behavior change campaign in your congregation. And it will also ask you if you have another behavior that you're interested in that is not on our list. And so depending on how many people, may be suggesting a different behavior, I could be motivated to include another behavior if there was a real interest there. So the toolbox is going to include a couple of things. It's going to include some surveys that you can use both for behavior selection and audience targeting, and also for your baseline measurements. What are people doing now? We're going to do some barrier and benefit protocols, sort of some interview and intercept survey templates to help you get those barriers and benefits. We're going to put together some sample customizable tools for each of the behaviors, so a prompt or a feedback, or some other kinds of tools that you could customize for your congregation. And then also evaluation guidance, so how to measure your behavior change, so either through survey or visual documentation. So those are going to be the things in our toolbox. And then what our plan is to have some training, a couple other webinars about breaking down each of these this will be shorter webinars, probably breaking down each of the steps and really walking people through using the toolbox to implement that behavior change. I will be able to do some mentoring with people, most likely the folks in Anne Arundel County. There are some other behavior change specialists in other parts of the of Maryland, and so I'm sure that we could hook you up with someone if you're not in Anne Arundel County. And then Bonnie also said she would be on tap to help with some survey implementation and other things. So that's what we have on track for the training. The training and mentoring, and the behavior change toolbox. And so that is, I think, where I'm going to leave you, except that I am so super excited that so many of you are interested in this topic, and I hope that some of you will implement some behavior change campaigns in your community, in your congregations. So with that, I'm going to pause for questions. So I think, is it, Bonnie, are you going to ask me questions, or Matt?
I'm going to ask you while Matt figures out how to get everybody's cameras turned on and everything so we can get started.
Great.
So eventually people's faces.
Bonnie, if I could just jump in real quick. I just gave everybody their permission to turn their cameras back on. They have to do it individually. So if you want to turn your camera back on, you can do so now, and then we'll all look like the Brady Bunch when we turn our cameras back on. There we go. Look at everybody go. That's great.
Okay. I will start though reading some questions that we have while they're trying to, so we can get some before everyone's talking. So Donna Betteridge has asked, do you have a wholesale grower to go to get reduced prices for trees and plants which are native for our area?
Sure. So, and this is Donna.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Donna, if you're in Anne Arundel County, we do have a how to source plants section right up from our homepage. It's on the what take action at home right from our homepage. The wholesale pricing is only available for watershed stewards. The agreements, most wholesalers really only want to work with contractors, but we have a whole list of where to get things and native plant nurseries on our website. If you're not in Anne Arundel County, I would go to mdflora.org. I think that's Maryland native plants. They have find a nursery near you.
Yeah, so this is Bonnie. I was going to say, for everyone in your different area, we can pretty much try to hook you up with a nursery through our technical partner, whoever that is in your area. We will work with them to find you resources. And then something that Suzanne mentioned, there is through the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, we have a coupon that's available where you get $25 off at nurseries all over the state. So there's a website that you can go to log on and see where there's a nursery close to you, and you can use that coupon to purchase a tree and use the $25 off coupon. Oh, so busy answering and not looking at chats. Okay. Cynthia Taylor asks, how do you recycle the compostable plates, saucers, and cutlery? We don't have a compost at church, but I have purchased a compostable tableware. Great question.
So here's, so with compostable flatware, you really have to get your compost pretty hot for it to break down. And one of the things that we do for events when we have that is we partner with a commercial composter. Sometimes we use Veterans Compost. There's other compost services that will come and pick up your compost or food waste and compost it in a very intensive way, more than your backyard compost pile. Sometimes they can vary on how hot they are, but a lot of times these compost companies will pick up from restaurants or other places, so you can find out about the local commercial compost company in your area, and maybe they could just pick up. You can do it event by event. It wouldn't have to be every week, but if you were having a big picnic, you could do that.
Great answer. So Solomon asked, is single-use plastic like plastic wrap and water bottles?
Yeah, so single-use plastic is a term that's meant for anytime you use plastic and then you discard it. When you discard it, it can either be recyclable, like a water bottle, or non-recyclable, like plastic wrap. And certainly different jurisdictions have different thresholds on what is or is not recyclable. But what we are beginning to understand as a community is that just recycling isn't good enough, because there's so much of our waste that we send to the recycler but never gets recycled. We know that the more we're purchasing of plastic, the more actually ends up in our waterways. I've done a whole bunch of little beach cleanups since I've been on quarantine, and it's all plastic. And so if we can use less plastic, then there's less plastic that is making it out into the waterways. And so that would be plastic wrap, water bottles. A big one for me is shampoo bottles, or laundry soap, or food containers like the clamshells. And I recently started using shampoo bars instead of bottled shampoo, and I've really loved that. And it's not that expensive and lasts a long time, and my hair looks great, doesn't it?
Great. So Gail Carter has asked, is Bonnie the mentor for Silver Spring? And she said, great briefing. She wanted to let you know, Suzanne. So the way we work at Interfaith Partnership with Chesapeake is we all have different regions that we work. So once you reach out to one of us, we will find you the right person to be your mentor in your region. So just reach out. Generally, I don't cover Silver Spring, but we can work with you individually to find out who's going to help you, and then what technical partners would work with you as well. Scott Kirby, he has a great observation and question. So it's a little long, so bear with me. One of the first steps is to engage the leadership of the congregations, the pastor, rabbi, imam, and the elders or church council. Any thoughts or suggestions on how to get them on board? Without that support, or at least permission, other actions can't get any traction. So Suzanne, I'll take this one because this is a wonderful opportunity for us to plug our great Faithful Green Leaders workshops. So we are having Faithful Green Leader workshops all throughout our area. And so that is one of the first topics that we cover. We call that getting credentialed by your church leadership or your congregational leadership. And we go over different ways and strategies to go about doing that. So great question, Scott. Yes, we have to have leadership on board. And we know that sometimes is a challenge in some congregations. And we're here to help you try to work through that. Let's see. Laura Heller says, since the church is all about being inclusive, how does that work with targeting certain groups? Shouldn't we be asking the entire congregation if they have an interest in certain activities?
Yeah, so actually, I actually hate the word target audience for also that reason. But what that specifically refers to, well, you know that, remember the diffusion of innovations curve where we had the show me, make me, and help me group? If you just ask people to be part of something, the only people that are really going to join you are the show me group, that first 15%. If you were to say to your whole congregation, hey, we want you to change all your light bulbs over to LEDs, guess who's going to be involved in that? It's going to be that first 15%. If you want to get to that middle segment, that is, all those people that want to change their behavior but just need help, you really have to know what kind of help they need. And not everybody is going to need the same kind of help. And so what you want to do is you want to pick a group that's big enough that will be worth an investment of finding out what kind of help they need, and then try to give them that help. And so that's what that targeting is about. It's not practical to necessarily find out what every single different person or all different audiences need, but what you want to do is you want to figure out what the, that biggest audience needs and try to give it to them. You can offer those things to everyone in the congregation, but you know that they're going to really fit one group. So it's the targeting is really about trying to get at what help people need. And not to say you can't offer that help to everyone. You could offer that help to everyone, but you know that it's only specialized for that group. Does that make sense?
Yes. Great answer. Karen Royer has asked, is there info about replant Anne Arundel that we could use to kick off a tree planting campaign? Before you answer that question, Suzanne, I do want to say Noelle Chow is here, and she works for WSA, and she's been putting all kinds of links in the chat box that are great resources. And we will certainly, at the end, share those links for everyone where that's appropriate. But go ahead and answer, Suzanne.
Yeah, so replant Anne Arundel. Can you guys still see my screen or no?
Yes.
Okay, maybe you want to turn me off as a presenter. No. Only because I was trying to find your faces, to see your faces while I'm answering them, but I'll just answer them with audio. So Replant Anne Arundel is an Anne Arundel County program, and it is a specialized program to incentivize tree plantings. And I think what Bonnie would say, were she to be in my mouth right now, she'd say, wherever you live, one of the things to find out about is where are, what are the incentives in your area? If your community, if your congregation needs incentives, what are the incentives? Replant Anne Arundel would certainly be a big incentive for people in Anne Arundel. There's the Maryland DNR tree coupon that's available to anyone in Maryland. There may be other incentive programs that are available in other parts of the state. So definitely finding out about what programs already exist is a great way to start. And again, the technical assistance provider in your local area could help you with that, and Bonnie can hook you up.
Okay, lots of consternation out there about our different regional capacities for composting and recycling, and that's a big frustration amongst all of you. So each region has different capabilities, and so we would have to work with you to figure out in your area what is available, and if it's not through your local government, then do we have to find a private way to do that? So we hear you, we know, and we'll just have to work through that with you in your location. Okay, this is great. This is from Marcy Hostetler. Is there a good site for demonstrating communities of faith who have converted lawns to buffers and pollinator gardens?
I don't know where you are, but again, I would say that Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake is your best bet at finding someone who might be near you, who could, who might have a congregation that has, oh, pretty kitty, Karen, that might have a pollinator garden or conservation landscape. The other thing that Noelle has done is she's taken people not even to congregation sites, but just to other homes that have implemented some of these practices. So if you can get people to see what you're trying to convince them to see, that's helpful.
And I was also going to say, stay tuned, because we are working, Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake is working on a upgrade of our website. We hope that will happen sometime this year. Things are a little up in the air with all the craziness. And once that happens, you'll be able to go on our website and you'll be able to see all the congregations that are in our network and click on them and be able to tell who's done what, and have information about all the projects that they've done and contact information. So until that happens, just contact me or one of our other staff, and if you're really interested, in the Baltimore area, we have a piece that we call Go See for Yourself, and it's a whole list of all the congregations in Jones Falls and Gwynns Falls that have done installations with the lead volunteer, and what the projects cost and where they got grants and how much grant money they got. So that's available for folks in the Baltimore area, and we will be working on that. I think we have one for maybe Montgomery also, I'm not sure. But we can help you find those types of projects if you want to go take a look, and we always put you in touch with one of those other volunteers that can help you and kind of mentor you through a process that they've been through. Just did that today with a congregation that wants to paint a mural, and connected them with another congregation that painted a mural. So we do this all the time.
Can I just jump in, Bonnie? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Jody. Marcy, I just saw that you're in Lancaster. There's a lot of turf to meadow projects going on up there, and happy to put you in touch with Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay up there. They're working with a lot of properties, maybe not all faith-based communities, but a lot of, that's a big push in Lancaster right now. And great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Lots of questions. This one's funny.
Through that, I just wanted to go back to Scott Kirby's question about getting credentialed really quick while you're prepping for your next comment. I know that we plugged the Green Team training program, but I'm not sure that helps everybody if they can't get there. And I think one place to start, Scott, is to not be alone. And so one of the key components of the Green Team training is to build a small group around you first. And sometimes your ask for your spiritual leader can be just simply who else in the community might be interested in joining such a team. I think the key with getting credentialed with your pastor or your rabbi is to begin to get yeses. And so asking for a big action right off the top of the bat, or something that, you know, might be a little bit contingent, even if it doesn't feel big to you, that might be a barrier. But simple asks like, I would like to find others in the community that are interested in caring for God's creation, and I don't really know what we want to do with that yet, but I just want to build a team around me. Have you, do you know any other members of the congregation that have expressed an interest in that? That's a simple question that they don't need to put up big walls around you. And just little yeses like that over time, and begin to build, a little bit of momentum is, I think, a way to begin to penetrate if you're having, a lot of resistance from the top.
Great, thanks, Jody. Donna Betteridge has said, our church has a plant swap every spring, which helps people to connect. It is at someone's home with large gardens. Just a suggestion. So that might be a way. We might have to leave our plants at our mailbox or something for people to come by and swing by and pick things up while we're on lockdown. Medea, we hear you. You need help with more tools. We will be working on helping you and getting them to you. Let's see. So I think
Brad had a good comment. Can I read Brad's?
Yep.
Brad said, glass containers can be harder to recycle than plastic. Some products are only offered in plastic. Need to focus on the manufacturer. So that is so smart. So there's a whole thing about behavior science and choosing an audience. And sometimes the audience that you choose is not the end user. It's more in what we call the upstream or midstream, in the manufacturing part of it. And so if you're trying to affect change on a large scale and you want to really hit the supply chain, that's definitely something that has been very effective in behavior change campaigns. However, for congregations, we felt like that maybe was not the way to focus, just because we're all volunteers and trying to do things, you know, sort of with the resources that we have. But that's a great point. And then the other thing that you said in there that was really like gold to me is that you're really highlighting some of the barriers. Some products are only offered in plastic. And so when you do a behavior change campaign, you're going to be wanting to know what people's concerns are. And so sometimes when you can hear concerns, it can feel defeating, like, oh, nobody can do my behavior because they have all these reasons why they can't. But you just have to focus on understanding what those reasons are, and you can think creatively about which ones you can help them overcome. So I thought your comment was great, Brad.
Yeah, great. So we have about 5 minutes left. So if there's a burning question out there, I think if you just want to raise your hand so we know you want to ask something, and so we're not talking over each other. Any other questions? Comments?
Well, I just want to address Phil's question or Phil's comment. Okay. Phil Colbert said, can I use these behavior change techniques on my 15-year-old son? And I have to say they're only moderately successful on my husband. So although I have actually used some on my family, and it's been very interesting. But the key thing is listening to what the barriers are, and then meeting them where they are. But here's the thing, you can only change a behavior that someone wants to change. So if your son doesn't want to change his behavior, sorry.
That's where the incentives come in.
Yeah.
Well, great. So if there aren't any more questions, I just want to take a moment and thank all of you so much for coming tonight, spending time with us, and being those soldiers on the front lines of trying to forge ahead with trying to help save God's creation. We can't do the work that we do without all of you, and we're just so grateful. I'm grateful and thankful every day to get to help all the volunteers like you. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Great.
Can you hear me? Before we break up, can you all hear me? Before we break up, is somebody going to put out a sheet on what we've done here so that we have a piece of paper, or send it to us online so we can print it out? I want to be able to take this, and somebody makes better notes than I do, I want to take it to my committee.
Yes, actually, we recorded the session, so you'll have a copy of the access to a copy of the recording. I think Suzanne said during this that she would make the slides available as well without the recording. So if you just wanted to have the slides. And I didn't plug earlier, and then all the resources that Noelle put in the chat, those are mostly for Anne Arundel County, but we have resources available on our website, and we can help you with those. I did want to give another plug to, we do have a series of learning labs that are a part of our Faithful Green leaders workshops. So the ones that have already happened are already on our website and posted. So those recordings are available for you to go back and listen to. The first Thursday of every month is another learning lab. So there'll be one the first Thursday. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So the next one will be in May, and you're all welcome to join us for those. And those will be going through the year. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Again.